the audience building, when I just think back to 3 years ago versus today and who I would consider in my inner circle or like people I look up to or talk with regularly, it's like shocking that like 90% of them are people I truly just met through LinkedIn, and that is that I think is super underappreciated. It's just this new paradigm we're in where like it's not enough to be meeting people around you in your local community or just like at the office. Like that just isn't most people's reality anymore.
You are listening to How To Thought Leadership with Julie Morris.
I just got to sit down and have a really amazing conversation with Mitch. So Mitch founded Pond. And if you know anything about Pond, you know that it was a startup that was designed to serve nonprofits. Mitch Stein is a really cool guy. And you can read his bio and get to know him. But what I can tell you is this. When you can find someone who has walked the walk and you get to follow their journey and you get to learn from them and you get to understand more because they went there first and then they bring you along, like that is the coolest ever. So a couple of my very favorite takeaways from this conversation. Who is this serving? Asking yourself that question. So when Mitch mentioned that phrase, it really struck me because everything we do should point back to a question that anchors you. Maybe a couple guidelines, couple questions, a framework, a strategy. But if your only strategy was this, who is this serving? Who are you serving? That's enough to get you started. So we, of course, are going to talk about the tactics and the how-to of thought leadership. And when you hear Mitch's story, it's heavy. It's a lot, but it's amazing and it's beautiful and it's light because he's very funny also. But when someone brings you along through a journey of something that has started and then has been put to bed, it's kind of a moment where we get to just all bear witness to the fact that most of us don't follow our dreams. Like most of us will think about it, want to do it, get excited about something, but then it gets hard. It's understandable. I don't know how many of mine that I've probably just left in a journal somewhere. But he built it. He pushed through and he made it happen. And there's not a lot of people who can say that they did that. So when you get to listen to Mitch, you're getting to hear the pain and the joy. I mean, the grief that's there, but also like, this is the journey. You build, some things go great. And, but being present for the fact that if the only path we ever walked was this perfectly straight, paved sidewalk of a road, we would never experience all that life has to offer. We just wouldn't, right? So I'll just say this, be brave, work out in front of you on a piece of paper. What are your dreams? And some of the reason that you're here and you're looking at thought leadership is because you have these dreams. You just know that there's this piece missing where you have to get more support. You have to get more funding. You have to get more people behind you. And thought leadership is a way to make those dreams come true. My dreams are coming true right before my eyes, not because I am special, not because I am popular, not because of anything except that I will not stop trying to build around me a bunch of really cool relationships through networks and through people that I meet in my favorite virtual coffee shop, LinkedIn. So think about those dreams as you're listening to Mitch and me have this great conversation. And get started. All right. So, Mitch, as I've watched from afar, like most people get to do with you, they get to see all that you put out there. But of course, we know that that's not everything and that there's a whole journey and everything that happens to a founder that's behind the scenes and not easy. And so what we see now from afar, because I know that you have a ton of fans. I know you have a ton of people that really like you, have appreciated the type of leader that you are, and are now super excited for your next thing. But I think that anyone who is watching wants to know the same thing, and that is, how are you holding up?
Yeah, I'm doing well, honestly. I think for anyone who's gone through, closing something down, I think it might be similar to leaving a job, maybe getting laid off, like all these things where there's like this disruptive moment in your life, especially if there was a lot of build up to that, which was the case for me, where, trying to make something work for 3 years. And especially in the last few months there, we were trying to raise money to keep things going, had to make a lot of tough calls around laying folks off and thinking about new directions to take the business. And it all just, that was taking a big toll. And I think once making a decision and kind of like setting it down allowed me to find some peace and honestly feel a lot better after the fact. So, it's like grieving any kind of loss where there's stages, but I think I definitely felt that initial relief of having that just like constant stress off my shoulders. And now I've just kind of sat back and tried to take it a little easy, have a bunch of interesting conversations with people without really any objective. And that's been great. And I'm feeling hopeful about what, all the opportunities ahead and all the different things that I can do and how much more there is to life than that one chapter for me. So I'm doing okay.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I don't know about you, but this whole idea of authenticity, of being real, of bringing our whole self into life and work and to all of our thought leadership, everything we're building and everything that we let people in to see, that is new for me. I mean, it's not fully new, right? Like there's always been some of that there, but I'm really trying to bring the rest in. And I'm doing that because we like to make a really good show of being perfect. We don't ever want to see that anything's hard, anything's wrong. I am the founder that is the hero of heroes, and follow me because I am worthy of being followed. Look how awesome I am. And that's tough, right? Like that's not sustainable. It's not real. It's not deep or true. And we're going to fall out of that picture of fake, probably at just the wrong moment anyway. But do you feel like as you've tried to explore what it looks like to be a full picture of you and be the authentic you, how does that come together for you? Has it been pretty easy or has it been a bit of a journey?
Yeah, I actually think I kind of stumbled into thought leadership. I never was like, oh, I need to start being a thought leader and I'm going to invest in this. Like, maybe some of the listeners of your podcast. For me, it was more out of necessity because I had never used LinkedIn before 2020. I was an investment banker for 7 years and we were just like scared to use the platform because no one used it. You didn't say anything externally about work ever. And so once I was kind of like out there on my own trying to start this business in a space that I cared about in the nonprofit world, but not something I was like deeply connected in, I was like hustling to find like, oh, who do I know that works in the space or first degree connections. So I started spending a lot more time there. And then I started noticing the way other people were using the platform and things they were sharing. And so I started to just like try to do some of that too. And I was just following other examples. And then really quickly, the rubber hit the road on how difficult startups are and like started having some of my first challenges and honestly committing to posting things on LinkedIn regularly and developing like themes for myself or things I wanted to share were really helpful to like give me some structure and keep me on track in that like really ill-defined path that you go on when you're any kind of entrepreneur where no one's really telling you what to do. And from the very first thing I did was a Mental Health Monday series. So for me, it was like the only way I knew how to cope with all of the ups and downs and challenges of founding a startup was to share it because we were all extra isolated. And I had also moved right at the beginning of the pandemic back to my hometown in Fort Wayne, Indiana from New York City. And so I was like truly living in my childhood bedroom, like working on this stuff and, feeling pretty alone. And it was amazing that the platform gave me an outlet to connect with people. And so I always felt like I was doing that authentically. And if I wasn't, I didn't fake it. What I would do is I would just stop sharing. Like I'd have some gaps in when I was using the platform. And that's when it was getting like too real or I was having too hard of a time where it wasn't just the kind of thing like, we might get into this more, but there's a difference between vulnerability and boundaries, as Brene Brown says. And so I always, when it felt too real or too much, I would be like, you know what? I can disconnect for a little bit or not have to be posting, and that's okay. And I'll get back to it. So that was kind of how I came to it with authenticity and how I managed to continue doing that while sticking to my own boundaries throughout the process.
Love that. So, of course, this podcast is all about the how-to of thought leadership. We're trying to make things really tactical. And you were one who we got to watch bring a startup from, earlier stages. I'm not exactly sure when you got to starting to bring that forward on LinkedIn. But what I can tell you is that I think anyone who would know you knows that you're a great and genuine and thoughtful leader. And we know this about you because of the thought leadership you put out there. Not because you say, I am a great and genuine and thoughtful leader, but because of what you do. It's like the show, don't tell kind of thing. But it sounds like that LinkedIn has been definitely a part of your journey, and you've been able to bring people along this building with you. What has that meant to you?
Yeah, it's been huge. I mean, as I said, all very kind of like accidental. I certainly had no like intentions or goals around it. So I just continued to be like surprised and happy. Obviously it was great when it was helping to build the business along, and like bring more people to the site and help us connect with partners, like all those good business things. But on a personal level, I mean, I truly can't even count the number of times someone would reach out and it be another founder that felt seen by something I shared I was going through, and just someone that I used to work with who was like so inspired by your journey. Other, especially like LGBTQ folks in the workplace that felt like so seen by having someone like lead with that front and center as a part of their identity and sharing lots of stories around that. So totally unexpected that what I had to say or share and how I would share it would really have an impact on people. And even I think that was further shown once we announced that we were closing down the startup, how many people I had reach out to me in that moment in particular, like, well, you better not stop posting on LinkedIn. Like, we love how you share and how you share it, and how you share stories. And so it just I took some time to figure out exactly like what that path forward looked like and how I would keep showing up and sharing depending on what I would do next. But it's been really cool. Like, I always thought of myself as a writer and I liked writing as an outlet, but I just never really used it, especially as a banker, right? Like, investment memos are not quite the same. And so I think that's why it worked for me. It was a creative outlet for me. It wasn't like an arduous task. I viewed it as like something I got to do. And then I kept having this feedback loop of people expressing how much they enjoyed it, engaged with it, et cetera, which again made it validating and satisfying to work on. So yeah, it meant a lot in all those regards. I think the audience building, when I just think back to 3 years ago versus today and who I would consider in my inner circle or like people I look up to or talk with regularly, it's like shocking that like 90% of them are people I truly just met through LinkedIn, and that I think is super underappreciated. It's just this new paradigm we're in where like it's not enough to be meeting people around you in your local community or just like at the office. Like, that just isn't most people's reality anymore. And there's this huge potential to connect with the people that share your values, your goals, your like aspirations for the world around you. Like you don't have to be limited to the people in your immediate vicinity. And there's a way to like find and connect with those folks in a really genuine way. So yeah, I mean, it's part and parcel of like everything we did on the platform.
That's incredible. 90%. I mean, we're trying to all figure out the paradigm, right? So we're going to come back to ponds because I know that I would love to hear more. And I know everyone else would love to too, right? But can we just sit with that for a second? 90% of the people that you know in your world that you do life with and work with, etc., came from meeting here. I've been trying to figure out, Mitch, like, what the heck is the paradigm? Is it a conference lobby? Is it like we're all at Starbucks together, some coffee place together? Do you have a paradigm when you think about LinkedIn or ever try to explain the value of it to people?
Something that I've started to share, especially when talking to other founders, is like we all know when you're talking to investors that the single most important thing in their decision is like whether they believe in you as a founder. And that belief is almost always going to come down to like what your story is. Like why were you compelled to start doing what you're doing, and why are you the right person to make this a big success? And so in any like investor presentation or conversation, that's going to come up in like the first 2 minutes, and you're going to get 60 seconds to tell them that. And some people have a killer story and it's amazing and that's great. But even that is kind of limited when you think about it. You've got this 1 60-second window with one person. And on LinkedIn, it's like you're no longer in that one-on-one meeting. You're like simultaneously sharing bits and pieces of your story, thought process, perspective, experience, your expertise, your mentors, like all these parts of your life that make up your personal and professional life, in a way that would like organically happen over a coffee with someone, but you're kind of like doing it every day or every week or, you know, whatever your frequency is, in a way that people start to consciously and also subconsciously like absorb. And so it's like it has this effect where the first step, I feel like it happens in 3 phases with people, where like the first step is just that someone knows they like you. It's like, which maybe you can also pick up if you're in a coffee shop or at a bar, and you can kind of just know if there's like someone around you, you might not even be listening what they're saying or like fully understanding anything about them, but you just like, you get it. You're like, oh, I like that person. I won't mind if I'm sitting next to them. Like I just generally like that person. And the second stage is because they like you, they're going to start going like one layer deeper and actually like listen to the first few words that you say or read them. And then they're going to know what you do. And that's like a huge hurdle, is just understanding, you know, like Julie works on thought leadership, you know, like that simple connection, and just like really drilling that home for people is really hard because we're all like scattered and have no attention span. But that's like the second layer, once someone's paying attention because they like you. And then the third layer is like, because if I like you and I know what you do, over time, it builds trust. And so then people like really start to trust that you know, are an expert in the things that you talk about, or that you're going to do the things you say you do, or you're reliable, and all these important things in business. And I don't have a good like corollary for all that, because it's so unique, and I can't even tell you how many times I've gotten on a first conversation with someone, and you might have even said this to me when we first spoke, but how many people will say, oh, I feel like I've already met you because I follow you on LinkedIn. And so you now have this sort of like that baseline relationship with, it could be hundreds or thousands of people, that you're kind of like maintaining, maybe not at a super deep level if you haven't had a chance to connect with them yet, but when the time is right or you need something, then that person is like geared to want to help you and like geared to jump in and do something for you. And I've seen that over and over again. And I try to do the same, right, to other people that I've connected with in my network. And I think that's what really pays lots of dividends.
Epic. Okay. So of course I love the paradigm of anything related to coffee. It does feel like though, like you are having coffee with someone and the world is watching and they are getting to benefit from those learnings too. One of the things I love to say is, if thought leadership is nothing else to you, hopefully you can mentor at scale. Talk to you 10 years ago and serve at scale. And it just sends it out further, further, further. Anyway, so all right, let's go to Pond if we can, because there's so much to learn from your journey. And not many are willing to teach just as they go. And I think that's one of the things that people love about you and will love as they get to see what you're doing next and decide that they want to get to partner with you because you are such a teacher. But if you don't mind, will you take us back and walk us through your journey?
Yeah. Obviously it's a long story, so I won't go into every little detail, but I was previously, like, as I mentioned, working in finance and investment banker. I was covering software and internet businesses, and outside of work was getting more and more involved in the nonprofit world. I was a big fundraiser and board member, still on the board of the LGBT Center here in New York. And I'd raised a bunch of money for their event, Cycle for the Cause, which is the Northeast AIDS Ride. And my family, we'd lost my Uncle Marlon to AIDS in the 90s. And my dad and I started doing this bike ride from Boston to New York together a few years ago. And it just changed like so much in my life, my relationship with my family, my their connection to my community here in New York, my like connection to this organization. And I just really saw the power and the impact that had at a personal level, community level, even building my relationships at work. Like it just was what I was most excited about. And I was like, what does that mean if I know I don't want to do this job anymore longer term? And I just started exploring like where there could be opportunities for me to work in that space. And one of the things in particular from fundraising a lot was using their platform to do peer-to-peer fundraising. And it was super glitchy. The service was bad, and they were trying to find something new and went through this like painful search process and transition. And I just viewed it as really messy and unnecessarily burdensome on people who like, that wasn't what they needed to spend their time on. And that was like the first thing I started digging into and talking to people at other organizations. And it was just this shared experience of, oh yeah, anytime we have to pick the software, the consultant, the service provider, training, whatever, it's like each instance was bespoke, and they would just go to friends and ask them what they did and went through this like onerous search process. And I just thought, like, why couldn't this all sit within one platform and people just get good information and spend so much less time, and then build a better ecosystem for tools and services to be developed for the exact needs of nonprofits. It's a really fragmented but huge sector and space. And so it just felt like there was so much potential to introduce a digital platform to reduce some of that fragmentation and develop a better, healthier market around all the areas where they're spending a lot of money. We want to make sure that that's providing the highest impact for them. And so that was always the goal. We thought like creating there's lots of marketplaces we're familiar with, but like a kayak or Airbnb people, whatever your brand name is, but connecting those two sides of the market in a better way. And so, there were lots of twists and turns in the process. Like I said, I quit my job to start it, and 5 days later, the pandemic hit, and then I moved to Indiana. So a lot of unexpected turns, but ended up bringing several amazing people on board. We started with one version, it flopped. We pivoted to a new model. It did pretty well, but then started to fade out a little bit, managed to raise a little bit of money to keep it going, and then shifted the model again. Then we saw this big uptick in engagement about a year ago, and we're feeling tons of momentum. We got invited to pitch at South by Southwest, and we had a verbal offer to lead another financing for us to keep building. For anyone who's worked on or with marketplaces, they're very capital intensive. Whenever you have a two-sided marketplace, it's generally takes a lot of investment to bring it to scale, because you have that constant sort of chicken and egg problem where you need both sides at the party at the same time, which makes them extra difficult. But then last spring, the little things happened, like Russian invasion of Ukraine, the markets collapsing, especially around VC. So all the folks we were talking to kind of backed out, and things didn't really improve. We were trying to do our best to get things to scale without added investment, but just sort of reached a limit where that wasn't happening. And so had to kind of acknowledge that there can be multiple things true at once, right? That there was a big need for this, and there remains one, but it wasn't the right time and right environment for us to fully bring that to bear. But learned so much about the space, building companies in general, marketplaces in general, marketing, content marketing, thought leadership, like all these things that are really critical, especially in the social impact space. I feel like I, just got a front row seat and real life class on all those really important topics. So I don't feel like there was anything I'm like leaving behind. I'm just taking lots of those things into whatever comes next for me. And hopefully, like you said, all the way along and still now, trying to share like all the things we were doing and kind of open source the experience as best as I could, because there's so much need, particularly around like the social sector, and whatever I can do to share the ups and downs and learnings from the journey. I try to connect with as many founders and entrepreneurs in the space as possible, because we all need each other, and it's a very much a rising tide environment, which to me is exciting. I know there's still tons of opportunity.
Amazing. It's funny, like the dreams that we have that we kill before we even give them a chance. The feeling that, well, that's Mitch, like I'm not him. I'm not super maybe well known, popular. I'm not, I don't think I could ever get there. Does a startup founder ever think like that?
Oh, yeah.
Or if we start, oh yeah, that's common?
I mean,
that doesn't disqualify you?
This is the funny thing. So I was in a startup accelerator last year, which was amazing. It's called Startup Leadership Program. There's a few different chapters. I was in the New York one. It's all volunteer run and led. It actually itself is a nonprofit. They don't take any equity. It's a 6-month weekly program and curriculum, and we're 30 other early stage founders. And one of the ways they describe the group and what people like about it is that it is a safe place to suck. And I always just loved that terminology, because it also is so true that anytime we get together, with our cohort, and everyone's like afraid to say anything's going well. Or if they like say one thing positive, they'll be like, oh yeah, but the product roadmap is way behind. And like, we're still, it's like you're always so, I think founders are inevitably like just kind of a bit doomsday on the inside, while having to project this like rosy, ambitious, like, super positive exterior, which you have to do. Like your main job as a founder is you're creating momentum from nothing. And so that does take it takes an unnatural amount of energy and focus and creativity that does not come easy and can be really exhausting. So I think it's having spaces where you can go and like let your guard down and like really let your frustrations out were always key. But everyone has those imposter feelings, those the other part of it is like, as a founder, you think, especially really early stage, you're kind of doing it all, and you're not good at everything, right? Like, at least for me, I'm not a technical founder, so I wasn't actually doing the coding. But other than that, you end up kind of doing it all. And so you're not the best at each of those little things. And I think that's where you can look at other founders or other people's experience and be jealous that they're so good at any one particular thing that you feel like you're either self-conscious about or maybe lacking in. But the other thing is in today's day and age, like if you identify things that you're not as good at that you think are important, you can do them all. Like there is all the information at your fingertips to learn and improve at so many things. It's just a matter of where you want to focus your time. But number one, no one is good at everything. And number two, anything that you do want to improve, like don't just sit there and fret about it. Like go do it. You have all the resources in the world at your fingertips.
So as for, going to the tactics, of course. So as we sit and we do this conversation and I get to have this incredible conversation where I get to ask Mitch all of these questions I have. Part of my responsibility as a podcast host also is to be writing down the things that are my favorite. But every time I do, my computer wobbles because I'm not at my home office and it's killing me, Mitch. It's killing me. But you just can't let it stop you, right? Like we show up as we are, we do as we are. And I love that you are validating the fact that you can have dreams and also have doubts. And those two can coexist and it is perfectly okay. And that everywhere around you is resource.
Yeah.
And part of, I think, the beauty of thought leadership and building your network is that it comes together a lot faster when you have all of those at the moment.
Yeah, and not being afraid to admit the things that you need help with. I think for some, we underestimate everyone's willingness and desire to help. I think putting it out there, if there is a part of your business that you're like struggling with or want to just like talk to someone, or just start a conversation on other people's advice on the topic. Just a few weeks ago, I posted something about like your number one like mistake or best decision for anyone who started their own like independent consulting business. I had 100 people respond. So like, and now not only was that truly like, super helpful for me, and you have thousands of other people checking that out, that it's helpful for them. So you're like learning in this shared way. And again, like it's just you never know what you're missing out on by not asking. And I know like I'll call out that there's certainly some privilege in that. In like where it's safer, easier for certain people to ask those questions. And I don't want to make it sound like it's easy for everyone. I will just say that within your own boundaries or what you're comfortable with, and maybe it's not a big public broadcast, but reaching out to a few people that could be helpful. Like just don't underestimate people's desire and willingness to help, no matter where you're starting from, because it's really powerful. And I was blown away by it on a regular basis. Continue to be.
So if the people that are talking to you and the people that follow me and everyone here who's sitting and listening, inevitably, they will have to start something new, right? And whether it is this idea of like thought leadership, oh my gosh, no, why thought leadership? But they keep telling me I need to have a personal brand. And am I supposed to be an influencer? Like, they get tripped up on these terms. And I feel like some of that becomes a reason for them to stop. And you having to build in public. That's what thought leadership is really all about. And so putting yourself out there, we talked a little bit about the challenges that can come with it. And every once in a while, someone will say, well, what are the pitfalls? What are the challenges? And I'll say, let me see here. And I really have to think about it because often I am so focused on all the good that can come of it. But there are some things that can go wrong. Again, sometimes I have a hard time remembering what they are. But what would you say are some things that can go wrong if people are starting to build the startup of their foundership, of their thought leadership?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say in general, especially if we're going to focus on LinkedIn specifically, I think the risks are relatively low, mostly because LinkedIn is structured so differently from other platforms where it's actually like really hard to go back and find an old thing someone posted. So it like, within a week or two, it's just like out of people's, frame of view. And if you put something out there that doesn't get that much engagement, the worst thing that happened is not that many people saw it, and then it just sort of like moves on into the past. So if that helps like lower the stakes for people that are self-conscious about getting started, that's definitely the case. And it takes like, it's totally fine to experiment. Not everything you share will be like knock out of the park engagement or whatever, and that's fine. I'd say other pitfalls, depends on, you mentioned personal brand. I think being aware of like, what is your personal brand? Are you kind of a firecracker that wants to make more like hot takes and be a bit controversial and incite some of that like spicier conversation? That works for certain people. I think for me, I was really focused on where I had kind of the right to speak on something and not try to just like throw out an opinion for the sake of it, and always be pretty grounded and humble about how I wanted to share. I think there certainly have been moments where maybe I missed that, or I shared something that I probably could have taken like another edit or a question of like if that was my space to talk. And I think you get better at that over time, but that could be something where people feel like maybe they extended a little too far. And sometimes you can get some folks that'll call you out on things within the platform. So I guess it's all about how you want to show up and define your personal brand. There's some people that I see on LinkedIn who want to be that like call out person that is holding people accountable, and like that's their brand. But if not, what I always do, especially if you can tell in yourself, are you getting like kind of heated? Like, are you literally getting warmer as you're writing this because you feel really strongly about it and something just really irritated you? And I'll like write out a bit of a rant post, but I know it's a rant post. So usually I'll like walk away, come back like a day later, look at it again and be like this, or maybe even send it to someone else and be like, does this sound too spicy for me? Like, is this something I could share? And sometimes I might like edit it down a little bit or reduce some inflammatory language. But I'm always asking the question of like, who is this serving? Like, if it's just serving my need to rant, then it probably does not need to be out there, and especially doesn't need to be on LinkedIn. But if this is the type of thing that, like I said earlier, I could get one of those messages back, like, thanks so much for sharing that. I think about the person that would hit and impact and affect. And that's the lens that I'm kind of putting things through. And I think that helps with that pitfall of potentially stepping out of bounds in some way or another. But I've heard people complain. This comes up a lot. I'd say one of the most common reactions I get when I talk to other founders about LinkedIn is they are distracted by what I would call the anti-examples. So they're like, oh, I know I should be more active on LinkedIn, but I don't want to be like my one friend. Oh, they're so cringy. They're just like posting these brag posts all the time. And I so badly don't want to be them that I just don't engage. And my first reaction is like, well, if you only let the cringy people post, then you're letting them take over. Yeah, like if good, genuine people aren't sharing, then it's ruining the experience for everybody. But no, and I think that's like, it's a really real concern. And if people don't feel like confident or comfortable, and that's like what they're seeing a lot of, I can understand how that turns them off from the platform. But again, back to like starting with understanding who you are, how you want to show up, and just sort of like define those guidelines for yourself, and you'll avoid that pitfall, potential pitfall of like not coming across in a way that feels good to you. I don't know. Those are three. I don't know if that was, if you need more, I gave you thinking.
I love it. Well, if we could just, bottom line for me, you won't know until you start. You won't know the bad things that'll happen. You won't know the good things that'll happen. But I do know that the good are so going to outweigh the bad that you could possibly come up with. And, it's I wish I will try to remember who to attribute it to because someone wrote about this and I will remember. But you read a book and you're just like, how do I not remember that genius person who said this? But someone said, you won't know what your own voice sounds like. You won't know what you care about. Kind of like the gist around this. I think it was Samara Bay. You won't know until you start. You will discover your voice as you go. I don't think I even understood my passion around thought leadership and how, of all the things I could talk about, because I used to be spread across, between philanthropy, nonprofit, social impact. I have a lot of interests, right? But the core thread did seem to be that you person are a genius, and I need to suck that genius out of your brain and put it out there for the world around you. Isn't that so pleasant to think about? So you figure it out as you go. It's such a process of self-discovery. And one of my very favorite things that can happen that's good when you put yourself out there is, we've all been working so hard for so long. If you're listening to this podcast, I think we know that you're tired, right? Like you've been pushing, you've been building, you've been going, and it's not like it's going to come to an end soon. But what I also do know is that we sometimes go so long, so fast, and we don't even know who we are anymore. Like you wake up in the morning and you're just trying to figure out, like, are the people that I'm working with or the clients that I'm serving and the projects that I'm doing, is this thing that I love still, do I really love it? Do I really have a heart for this? And you probably think you probably do, but like, you probably have to like scrape some ashes off of it, maybe reform it a little bit, maybe pry off some pieces that don't belong anymore. And what thought leadership does is you start to use your voices, you start to figure out what part of that vision, that dream, that you is still core to you. And you start to revive that purpose, and it feels like you're lighting this fire all over again. And every time you light a fire, you'll never light the same fire twice. But if it's out, if it's flat, one thing I know is that you probably are not inclined to go putting yourself out there and talking about things you care about if you are burnt out and worn out. It seems really like antithetical, right? But the beautiful part about this is that you get to work it out with people around you, and you start to see and feel again when you barely can see straight. So I think like if we have people who are listening today who could look in the mirror and see their tired eyes and feel like they showed up here at this recording even today because they are desperate to fix a problem. Like, yeah, I think people come and listen because they have a mission, they have a passion. Now they just need to figure out the vehicle for it, right? But I think most people come because they have to. They show up on LinkedIn because they have to. How can you help that tired person, founder, leader to keep going?
Yeah, it's a very good question because you're right that I think everyone's tired. As just a general rule, I certainly have been feeling that, and it's a big reason why I pretty intentionally didn't want to jump into anything right after closing Pond. I was like, I'm going to sleep more, like work out every day. I'm going to we get so few opportunities in our life where we truly just have space. And even if for me, it's, just a month or two, but it was like, I really want to relish in that space, because for me, what I found when you talked about, like, you've kind of been on this track and you don't know why, or you're losing touch with your why. I think it forced me to think of my own like identity, purpose, what I cared about outside of work. And that is such a hard exercise to face, especially when you're able to fill all of your mind space with, the job you've been on, or the promotion you're seeking, or the company you're building, or whatever. So I would just say, first of all, like, if you're feeling tired, like, finding ways to take space and ask those hard questions is just so helpful and rejuvenating. And that can happen in a lot of different forms. It can happen in the form of sabbatical. It can happen in the form of vacation. It can happen in the form of leaving a job and giving yourself some time between things, depending on what's accessible to different people. I would also say, like, if you are super tired and burnout, like, take care of yourself first. I think you said something earlier where you were equating a startup to starting LinkedIn presence. And I think that's super smart because it really is. It's kind of like a new product you're building, or it is a new project, business, like whatever word you want to put on it. Thinking about it in that context, I think, is really helpful, because it can help. You can monitor the amount of time you're putting into it and what you're getting out of it, and realize it's super high return. If I were managing a business and different products, that one would be incredibly valuable for the time spent and very high return. So I just wanted to call it. Someone mentioned that a similar concept. We started a Slack community for the nonprofit members on Pond to be able to chat with each other. And I talked to someone who ran a really large Slack community for a different company. And that was his advice, was like, you have to think about this as like another product and have a whole strategy around, like, you need to be that intentional with it. It's not just like an add-on thing, or it's not going to succeed. So I think, although I don't mean that to make it sound overwhelming to someone, but just to be really intentional how you're going to invest in it, what you want to get out of it, and monitor that. And with that, you need to be set up to do that. And I think you need to be in a good place personally. So making sure you're taking care of whatever exhaustion or burnout you're experiencing. And a part of that, as you're working through it, can be to start in small ways, because I think that can be motivating. It can, like I said, for me, I would basically just journal and then take snippets of my journal and make those into LinkedIn posts when I felt like they were kind of resonant, or my stream of consciousness started to make a little sense somewhere. And so I treated it as an outlet. And that was my way to get started and connect it to, to my personal process. And everyone will be a little bit different, but I think making sure you're starting on good footing, start small, and just being really intentional with it is probably the best way to manage through. And it requires just a little bit of faith, that it's worth your time, which I think starting anything new always does. But reminding yourself of that you're taking a leap of faith. But what better faith to have than in like yourself and the people around you? Like, that's really what it is.
Well, Mitch, it's so interesting you say that. So I love this so much. So life can, be crazy, and work can be crazy, but when you have something that you love, and these conversations, I always say, they feel electric. It feels like something happens that just is, you learn something about yourself. You learn a lot about other people. And yeah, it's totally, like the joyous break that you get to be involved in. And so, so you hosted a podcast through Ponds, is that right?
Yeah, I do. I would definitely want to get back to
it.
it. I have, but in the spirit of taking things slowly, I have decided that is like a bit of a back burner project. But yeah, we did two different main things. I hosted a podcast where we would interview nonprofit founders and leaders, and we went to different cities. So we would do like 10 folks. We got through 3 different seasons, and it was called the Kids Table, because what we were seeing across so many folks that worked in social impact is, in so many ways, they were kind of put at the kids' table in their job, and not valued or respected for their leadership, and all of their abilities and skills, because they worked at a nonprofit and not at a for-profit business. So just kind of hit that really head on and gave people the space to talk about those things that are generally kind of like, swept under the rug or a bit taboo. So the conversations were amazing. I loved leading, I loved helping people kind of share more of their stories. And there were a lot of people who weren't interviewed on a lot of podcasts. That was the whole premise, was that we were, shining a light on these things that are underappreciated. So I loved
Mhm.
that. The other thing we did was we hosted a weekly webinar. So I would moderate. We always had a panel of experts on a ton of different nonprofit topics, and we turned some of those episodes into podcasts too. And yeah, I loved it. I would love to get back to it. I mean, you're a great interviewer. There's a certain joy and passion that comes with um, seeing people get comfortable, light up in a conversation. And it's just like, it's hard to match. So I want to get back to it.
It is indeed. Well, so Mitch, to your point, you're giving yourself space before you launch headlong in. And so part of me is like, how do you even slow down enough? But that's a whole other podcast conversation. It's like how to actually learn how to sit still.
Yeah.
But I would love to hear like what feels like it might be percolating, or what do you think is next for you?
Yeah. So the cool thing about taking that space is you start to realize that all of us, abundance mindset, there's lots of opportunity. We're all valuable. There's like lots of things we can be doing. And so being selective about, I don't really want to go work for someone else full time right now. I also don't want to start my own venture necessarily, but I'm trying to finalize a couple. I describe them as like fractional roles at a few different startups in the social impact space, where I can add value and be almost like a quasi founder level support and abilities to bring to someone's business. And so I'm trying to firm up. I think I'm going to work with 3 different companies to start. And then outside of that, where those are, kind of deeper engagements. And then outside of that, I'm starting to help a few different folks on their LinkedIn, especially other founders, helping them set up that personal brand strategy and just develop a plan for them, help, interview them and get their thoughts out there, because we all have brilliant, genius things in our head that are waiting to be shared in a space like LinkedIn. So yeah, that's been more in response to a lot of people asking. So I'm making time for that, and it's a lot of fun. So it's a lot like this conversation. I know a lot like the work you do. And so just dipping my toe in and seeing where that goes as well.
It's funny when folks start to come to you, I will let you in on a little secret. They're all afraid of TikTok. Okay. Just go easy. If you start to talk to them about the TikToks, they will be scared and they will look at you like you're nuts. It's okay though. It's okay, because as we know, there's more than just LinkedIn, right? There's so much more. And what's funny too is when you start to type and you start to see your thoughts go into words, and those words start to coalesce into something that makes sense. I mean, you're gonna learn new things about you. But then when you start to do audio or start to do video, I mean, that's so powerful. Sometimes you don't look at yourself as a founder. You're so busy, you barely have time to take a peek in the mirror, right? One of the things of thought leadership before we wrap today that I have found to be shockingly vulnerable, that I never would have anticipated, was a new headshot. Mitch, I am in my early 40s, and I felt like I didn't recognize myself. I felt like I saw my mother in my face. I felt like I saw just this old lady. I was like, who is that? And if I hadn't been on that journey and doing these same things that, are having respective clients do and face and go after, I would not have known. And so one of the things that I think would be so beneficial about a founder working with you to develop their presence, their personal brand, all of the things that put themselves out there. It's cool because if you work with Mitch, you will have someone who's gone before you. And that's really awesome. So he'll know where the pitfalls are. He'll know where it's going to be weird and suck and get draining, but he'll also know, I think, all the things that will help you as a founder get to the success that you want to be at. And that's really exciting.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I love I love working with other people that are passionate, and that's kind of part and parcel of the job. Is if you've decided to jump out and found your own thing. And I totally agree with you. I can already see with the folks I've started working with that there's this like a very deep appreciation of knowing the person you're talking to has been there, and it's that trust is everything. And I appreciate that people put that in me, and I'm excited to see where it goes.
Mitch, thank you so much for taking us down this journey with you today. We are so excited to continue watching you go change the world in whatever avenue that looks like. And thank you for teaching us today.
No, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to How to Thought Leadership with Julie Morris. You can find Julie on LinkedIn and most other social media platforms. If you'd like to talk about how to increase your own influence through thought leadership, you can contact Julie through personateam.com.